Well, good morning. Good to see everybody today. Do you have a Bible this morning? We're going to the book of Joshua. Joshua chapter 24. We're going to look at an old and familiar passage today through fresh eyes, hopefully, that will help us as we think about think about our time together this morning. So good to see everybody. As Glenn mentioned a moment ago, we have been together on occasions like this many times in the past, and I've always enjoyed each and every one of those, and I'm glad to get to be with you again today. Trust that our time together this week will be helpful and beneficial to all of us. We're going to talk this week about strength for every season. We'll talk about some of the particular times in Christians' lives and try to make applications that will be effective and beneficial to us for that. And this morning we talk about something that I think will be applicable to everybody who is here, and hopefully we'll make some applications that will help us along that way as well. Appreciate very much the invitation of your shepherds to be with you again. Steve and Glenn have always been so very gracious. Very happy to be with Carson. As I said in the Bible class period, he's very, very special to me. And I love coming here because it lets me be with my grandson Kellen, and his mom and dad are also somewhat important. But Kellen's the main draw here. I'll tell you that, and so I enjoy that immensely as well. But glad to get to study with you this week and renew our friendship and meet some of you for the very first time, and that's always very special. And I look forward to our week ahead. December of 1998, NASA launched the Mars Climate Orbiter. It was a $327 million project to send this tiny little orbiter into the Martian atmosphere to not only study the atmosphere, but also to use as a communications point. And so it was a 10-month journey to get to the Mars atmosphere, and everything went exactly on schedule, just absolutely perfectly. But as it entered the Martian atmosphere, it was destroyed. And it was later discovered that it wasn't destroyed because there was a mechanical failure, because there was something nefarious that was going on. It was destroyed because there were two groups of engineers who were using two different units of measurement for thruster data. And on paper, when you looked at it, it was virtually imperceptible day by day, but over time, those minuscule, tiny little alterations of the spacecraft's trajectory was enough to send it ultimately, fatally, off course. When I read about that, I thought about the fact that, nobody at NASA intended to lose that, that spacecraft. Everybody was working hard. Everybody was committed to the mission, but no one stopped to check the alignment. And I think there's a lesson there of faith and life, I think, for Christians, isn't there? That most individuals, most Christians never intend that they're going to drift off course in their faith. It just happens gradually over time through very small choices that they make consistently. I would imagine if you're a Christian, you have many miles on the odometer of your life, you probably have names that you can put with that last statement. Because our lives ultimately are a product of our choices, aren't they? Our lives are a product of our choices. The first week of February in Temple Terrace, the college that meets down the street from our building has a lecture program every year. It brings in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people from around the country. And I was thinking about that about this lesson and about those people being there, that for many of those people, the decision to come to that school, wherever that may have been, it changed their lives profoundly. But beyond that, the person that you decided to marry has affected your life. The number of children that you have, the kind of job that you do, the career that you have chosen, on and on and on it goes. Those choices profoundly affect your life. And the point of that simply is that our lives are a product of decisions, both good and bad. That is especially true spiritually, isn't it? And so the Bible talks about different kinds of Christians, and they are different kinds of Christians because of the decisions and the choices that they have made. And so the Bible talks about strong Christians and weak Christians in Romans 15 and beginning in verse 1. The Bible talks about spiritually minded and worldly minded Christians in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. The Bible talks about alive in faith Christians and dead in faith Christians in Revelation 3 and verse 1. And the Bible talks about stand strong like a rock Christians and blow with the breeze Christians in Ephesians 4 beginning in verse 14. And the point of that is that the choices that we make are going to determine which side of the ledger we are on. because choices, like interest, compound over time. So this morning I want us to go to an old and familiar passage. It's out of Joshua 24, and you'll immediately recognize these words where the old Joshua now says, "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." You know those words. You've heard those words probably hundreds, if not thousands of times. I want to give you a little bit of background before we try to look at these words, as we said a moment ago, hopefully today through fresh eyes. But let me give you a little bit of background here. I want to tell you three things about the background of this famous statement. Number one, the first thing would be that it was spoken at the end of Joshua's life. It's spoken at the end of Joshua's life. Joshua is now an old man. And I would tell you that the view of life from the end to the beginning is radically different than from the beginning to the end. And the difference is simply perspective. Solomon said in Proverbs 20 and beginning in verse 29 that the glory of young men is their strength, but the splendor of old men is their gray hair. Now, he wasn't saying that there's anything particularly valuable about gray hair, although I would tell you it is the best kind of hair to have. I can honestly tell you about that. But he's saying that while young men can kindly, boldly go through things and they can just kind of bully their way and force their way through, older people have perspective of life. And so they see things a little bit differently. And that's Joshua. It reminds that age brings perspective with experience. We have a ton of young people. We have in our church family 150 young people from grade 12 down. And I often say to those young people that, listen, one of the reasons your parents are going to say some of the things that they say to you is because they have been 20 years old and you haven't. They've been 30 and you haven't. They have been 40 and you have not. And the difference is that they have perspective about things by age that you just do not have. Now, the great thing about Joshua is that he comes to the end of his life, and he is an old man, and yet he doesn't regret his life choices. What a great thing that would be, to be able to come to the end of your life and just survey the landscape of your existence and not have to be filled with regret for what you see. And so, number one, Joshua is at this point an old man at the end of his life. Secondly, it was spoken from a very full life. Joshua was an apprentice of Moses. And that means that he has seen some things. He has seen, to use the Bible's language, God's mighty hand. He has seen the plagues in Egypt, the parting of the sea, the gift of manna, the commandments in stone, the tabernacle of meeting. He has seen the death of Nadab and Abihu. This is a man who knows. He knows some things about God, and because of that, he knows some things about himself. He knows how to lead, and he has led well. And then third, this is spoken from a faithful life. The people to whom Joshua is speaking that day were all, with the exception of Caleb, they were all born in the desert. And so for 40 long years, he has been with these people. He has conducted thousands upon thousands of funerals. He has lived in some of the most extraordinary, difficult circumstances you can imagine. I would imagine it was difficult for Joshua to be patient with people who come to him and say, "Oh, Joshua, you just don't know what I've gone through. You don't know how tough my life has been." Well, yeah, he did, because he had lived it. And so now at the end of his life, he says, "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Could we talk about that familiar statement for just a minute this morning? And let's break it down just a bit. He begins by saying, choose for yourselves. Well, why? Well, because in essence he's saying, I can't choose for you. Because the fact is, ladies and gentlemen, that faith can be passed down, but it cannot be inherited. Faith can be passed down. You can help your children and grandchildren imbibe faith in their life, but they can't inherit your faith. It doesn't work that way. Even when Paul would write to Timothy and say, look, I am so proud of you and the man that you are and the faithfulness that you have. But he said, I know that first that was rooted in your mother and in your grandmother. And now I'm persuaded in you also. But I will tell you, Timothy didn't inherit that faith at all. His mother and his grandmother did their best to pass that faith down. to teach him, but he could not simply inherit it. It doesn't work that way. In fact, Jesus would say that whoever does not carry his cross and follow me, he can't be my disciple. Crosses, insofar as a Christian is concerned, are not accidents, they are choices. And that's still a challenge for us, ladies and gentlemen, because as with Joshua, there are still gods in the land. That's what he says. Choose for yourselves this whom you will serve, whether the gods of the land in which you dwell or Yahweh. And the challenge is the same, because in 2026, there's still gods in the land today. The God of intellectualism that says that Christianity is a farce. The God of subjective spiritualism that says you're free to worship God however you wish. The God of liberty that says there are no moral or ethical boundaries. The God of recreation or money or pleasure, or the most commonly worshiped God at all, and that's the individual that looks back at you in the mirror each day. No wonder John would end his writing in saying, little children, keep yourselves from idols. Choose for yourselves. You can be an undecided voter. You can pursue an undeclared major in college. But you cannot avoid choices that will alter the direction of your life. And so maybe the real question is, what is it that has veto power over your obedience to God? What is it in your life that you allow to have veto power over your obedience to God? Or maybe that's a who. Who is that you allow to have veto power over your obedience? I would say to the moms and dads in this audience that Joshua could not choose for them. That's what he acknowledges. But he did exert a profound influence. Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua and had known all the works that the Lord did for Israel. Choose for yourselves, he says, because I can't choose for you. But he did exert a profound influence, just as you as a parent or a grandparent can with your children and grandchildren still today. And then he says, I want you to choose for yourselves this day. The English here does not exactly reflect the Hebrew. The Hebrew actually says, you must choose and you must continue to choose. That's the business of choosing this day, as if he's saying, look, I need you to choose this day, and you're going to have to choose every single day. These people had chosen God many times in the past. They chose God when they crossed the Red Sea. They chose God when they marched around the walls of Jericho. But the challenge is that you can't serve God based on the choices of yesterday or last year. You've got to choose again today. Now that echoes the sentiment of Paul when he said, in a favorable time I listened to you, in a day of salvation I have helped you, and so behold, now is the favorable time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. And so he's encouraging Christians to realize whatever you did in obedience yesterday is an amazing thing, and it builds a foundation for the next day. But when the next day comes, you have to choose all over again. To young people in Ecclesiastes 12:1, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth. And we never talk about the now part of that. We always think about remember, Creator, days of your youth. But he says, I want you to remember now. And the point of that is there's some urgency about this, because the implication is that if you don't remember now, you're probably not going to remember in the future. If you don't build a foundation now, what makes you think you're going to serve God in the days that are to come? We love putting things off, don't we? It's so easy to put things off. College students, they're coming to a point in time in the semester. A lot of them are going to put off their term paper until the night before it's due. This is March. Taxes are due next month. It's easy to put them off. Going to the doctor, whatever it may be, we just somehow believe that there's always going to be a tomorrow to get those kinds of things done. But did you notice, ladies and gentlemen, that Joshua didn't think that way? Joshua didn't say, look, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we'll serve God. And then he didn't say, in addition to that, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home and sleep on it for a while and give it some thought. Talk it over with your family. Consult with your friends a little bit. And then get back with me next week, and we'll see where we can go forward from here. He doesn't do that. Jesus didn't speak that way at all. Jesus, for example, said in Luke 9, and beginning in verse 23, whoever wants to be my disciple, let him deny himself and take up his cross every single day and follow me. What an odd statement that is. Jesus said in the first century, I want you to take up your cross daily. Nobody did that in the first century. It was the ultimate one and done. If you were crucified, that was it. But for a Christian, it is, as Paul would say, I die daily. Why is that? Because every day that I wake up, if I had a choice, the world would just be about me. And so Paul said, I've got to die daily to that. Teaching self-denial is easy. Practicing it is another matter entirely. Choose for yourselves, because I can't choose for you. And choose this day, because no matter what you did yesterday, you have to do right today. And then third, choose whom you will serve. There's always been a choice about that. And the choice, honestly, has been pretty well defined. If we go back to the very beginning in the Garden of Eden, the choice that God gave Adam and Eve was a very simple choice. There was no ambiguity in that at all. The choice was, you can obey me or die. Well, that sounds harsh to us, but it was clear. There was no misunderstanding exactly what God was saying. Now, in the New Testament, the language is a little bit different, and it's moderated a little bit, maybe because of modern ears. But in the New Testament, it's things like this. It's that there are two roads in Matthew chapter 7. There is a wide road, and it requires very little of you, and it's very popular. There are a lot of people there. And there's a narrow road. Straight is the gate, and narrow is the way that leads to life, and few there be that find it. And then there are two kingdoms, Colossians chapter 1. There's a kingdom of darkness and a kingdom of light. It's that simple. There is no kingdom of twilight. And then third, there are two fathers. You have a choice about that. In John chapter 8, Jesus was in argumentation with the Jews, and he said, you are of your father, the devil. I am of my Father who is in heaven. And we all make a choice about whose descendant we want to be. But we will choose one of those two fathers. But what all of that is saying is that God demands what he gives. And what God gives is total loyalty. So the choice may not be easy, but it's certainly not complicated. And so choosing God's means getting rid of every other claimant in our heart. And we choose the one road, the one kingdom, and the one Father that makes us loyal to God. So choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me, and the point of that is that this choice, like every choice, is going to have profound consequences. Every choice that you make has a consequence, for good or bad. And we choose. We don't like to hear that. We don't like to hear that at all. We live in a culture that says, no, it's not. We live in a victim culture that says, look, I'm a victim of my circumstances or my genes or both. And so it's easy in America to excuse ourselves and say, well, I'm a product of the dysfunction of my mom and dad, or the sexual tendencies with which I was born, or the perceived ineptitude of my teacher, my professor, but when all is said and done, it is not my fault. And when we buy that, embrace that, live that, it makes it so that we never have to say that we are wrong, or that we are sorry, or that we are even sinful. American culture says to people, look, you need to explain yourself. And the New Testament says that we need to examine ourselves. But we need to be honest about that. Even when we take responsibility for good choices, sometimes the consequences can be so tough. We said in the Bible class, we quoted from 1 Peter 4, where Peter said, look, if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in that name. If you suffer because you made a good choice, a wise choice, a Christian choice, a spiritual choice, he said, don't be ashamed of that. Embrace that, because it makes you like the Lord. And so, Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So I want to end this morning by asking you 4 simple questions when making that choice. Here they are. Number 1, what does the Bible say? Filter things down, and you've got to make a choice with consequences. 4 questions to ask. Here's the first. What does the Bible say? Now, you knew that we would start there, but why would we start there? We start there because, ladies and gentlemen, if God has spoken, I don't get a vote. It's that simple. If God has spoken, I don't get a vote. It may not be easy. It may not be the way I want to go. God will always tell me the truth. And since His word is authoritative, if He has spoken, I don't get a vote. What does the Bible say? Question number 2, will this bring glory to God? 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 31, whatever you do in word or in action, do all to the glory of God. To give God glory means to say something about the reputation of God. And so we need to ask ourselves, as a Christian, if I do this and others know that I am a Christian, will this action or will these words enhance the reputation of God? Or will this action or will these words, if others know I'm a Christian and I'm representing Him, will this diminish God in any way? Question number 2, will this bring glory to God? Question number 3, is this the decision Jesus would make? See, the question is not, can I justify this? Can I make this palatable some way to God? No, the question is, can I follow Jesus in this? After all, 1 Peter 2 and beginning in verse 21, Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that we should follow in His steps. And so can I follow Jesus in this? And question number 4, can I live with this decision in eternity? Because Paul in 2 Corinthians 5 and 10 said this, we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in his body according to what he has done. Listen to him, whether good or bad. Whether good or bad. And so the question is, can I live with this decision in eternity? Because whether it's good or bad, I'm going to have to face this at some point in time. And so here's Joshua. And he stands at the end of a long and faithful life. And he doesn't offer any excuses or explanations or alternatives. He just says, look, as for me, not for my parents, not for my culture, not for my circumstances, but as for me. And he owns his choice. And he knows full well that when he owns the choices of his life, it's going to cost him something, but he also knows full well that it will be worth everything. And now this morning, that same moment stands before us. Not abstractly, not theoretically, not someday, but this day. Because every single day we wake up and we have to choose again. We have to choose again who is going to rule my heart today? Who is going to shape my values today? Who is going to command my loyalty today? Now we can blame. We can blame our failures on the culture, on pressure, on pain, on the past, on people. But in the end, discipleship is not inherited and discipleship is not outsourced. It is chosen personally and individually by you and by me. And so Joshua's voice echoes across the century, and it cuts through all the noise and the gods of our age. And he still says, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. And when all is said and done, ladies and gentlemen, when the perspective of age replaces the urgency of the moment, when eternity has replaced time, I pray that we will all be able to say, without regret and without apology, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. But that has to start with you today. Every person who's in this room this morning who's a Christian, whether you've been a Christian for 5 days or 5 months, 5 years, or with me, 50. It all began exactly the same way, by making a choice. There came a day where we said, I'm going to stop putting this off, and today's the day that I'm going to bow my will to the will of God and be buried in the water of baptism. I want to rise and walk in newness of life. We all started exactly the same way. And until the Lord comes, that's the only prescription that he will write. There will never be an amendment to that. You're never going to get Bible version 2.0. This is it. And so if that's you today and that's your need and you realize that this is the day that you need to be baptized into Christ or come home to your Father, then choose wisely today. If we can help you with that, we hope you'll let us. Let's stand and let's sing.